say the obvious, which is I let a bunch of y'all down. Now, this is not an apology to her. The media always stops at this point. I'll talk about this one part. This is going to be about 2 sentences, and they might stop there. So to my beloved friends in the media, I'd say keep on going. The story goes beyond this. But let's say the obvious, which is I let a bunch of y'all down. And, I apologize. And people say, quit apologizing, move on. But I would say that if I offended my brother or my sister, I would owe them an apology. But then the question is, what comes next? And the measure of every one of our lives is not are we going to fall down once or twice in life, perhaps not at the epic level that I did, but what happens next? And the measure of every one of our lives is how we get back up. And less important for y'all's lives is the process of my getting back up than the bigger conversation we got to have as South Carolinians on where do we go from here. Because after every fall of life, and if you haven't, I've never had one before. I kind of made up for lost ground with this one. But anyway, there is this time of reassessment, time of looking at things that are important, time of looking at goals, time of all those different things. And on every Friday night, here in high school football time, there'll be a winning and a losing team. I will guarantee you the team that loses does a whole lot more review, a whole lot more going back to the basics than the team that wins. And so the question that I would ask every one of you is not what is the General Assembly going to do, not what is Mark Sanford going to do, but what are you all going to do in this larger question of where do we go from here? Because in some ways, and the only reason I'm still here, is that I believe that we have a genuine opportunity, if you want to call it that, in the silver lining to the gray clouds based on the lemons that I poured down before, and I believe that God can make lemonade out of lemons. Because if you stop and think about it, if you all went with me up to Columbia over the last couple of years, you would find many conversations that went along these lines. I hear where Mark's coming from, but, I think that guy's running for president. And I'm not about to give him a victory on that he can put as another feather in his cap as he continues to climb up in life. I'm not going to do it. Well, if there's anything that is abundantly clear to everybody in this room, and for that matter across South Carolina, it is that I ain't running for president. I mean, that one's kind of off the table, and we got that one over here. And so for the first time in, frankly, many, many years, we can actually have a real conversation not about what would this do with regard to Mark's political career or this or that, but about the issue itself. And so what we're proposing in this legislative session, which in a strange turn of events could well be the most productive legislative session that I would have had during my 6.5 years thus far, is what if we had a conversation about, for instance, the structure of our government. Now, I've been having a conversation for 6.5 years on that. I mean, Shannon's been having a conversation. A number of us have been having a conversation on it. But I mean a big conversation with all of us as South Carolinians on does it really make sense to stay where we are? Or is it time to change that? And here's the opportunity part. I can't tell you the number of Rotary clubs I've talked to over the last 6.5 years. And Brantley can attest to this because I'm sure he had similar experiences when he was Lieutenant Governor. I went to a lot of them, and there weren't any TV cameras there. I can't go anywhere now without 3 or 4 or 5 television cameras there. And can we take that political energy that's in the room and use it to make some changes that will make a difference in people's lives? Because if we had this conversation, we really could do some things. Now, let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. On the restructuring bucket that we would like to tackle this year, we're not trying to aim at Mount Everest. We're saying what's specific, measurable, and achievable that we could pass and get done in this legislative session. We're saying, for instance, could we move the administrative functions from the Budget Control Board to the Governor's office? Now, there's a bill that's already passed the House that would do that. It's been held up over on the Senate side. But if enough of you all called, emailed, or wrote, not just, okay, Shannon's already on board. She's with us. Tom's already on board with us. But South Carolina is a small and connected place. And if enough of us had a conversation with a friend, relative, cousin, or other somewhere across the state, we could make that change. Now, why is it important? We're the only state in the United States of America that does it as we do it. We're the only state in the United States of America that has a budget control board that handles the administrative functions that are handled by the other 49 governors in the United States of America. Now, what's that lead to? It leads to, for instance, from a system standpoint, a real lack of accountability. The way the system works is, when the budget's rolling up, in fairness to Shannon, and Van just mentioned it, it is her job to watch out for her district. And part of that means grabbing her share of cash. If the dollar's going to get spent, let's make sure it's spent down here versus some other place. So when times are rolling, there is every incentive in the world for everybody to grab their piece and not particularly worry about where the number's going to go next. Who cuts the budget in the off-season when times aren't rolling? Do y'all know? The Budget Control Board. Now, how much spending restraint will you find in a system where when times are going up, the politician, and I'm not saying that in a pejorative sense, but the elected member, House or Senate, gets credit when times are going up, and when times aren't going well, some other group, the Budget Control Board, does the cutting. I mean, that is a system designed in one direction in terms of political incentive. Or think about this. I take it, the gentleman in the back is a military man. They always put one captain as the head of the ship. All right? As I understand it, the superintendent is here with us from an education standpoint. In education, they put one principal as the head of that school. How much accountability is there in a group of 5? I mean, who is really accountable? But that's the way that our system works. And I could give you a lot of other studies and statistics that point to that thing has a lot to do with, again, a system that just doesn't work all that well from the standpoint of cost. We're 138% the U.S. average in the cost of our state government versus other state governments. When you visit friends or relatives in other states, do they say to you, man, I wish I lived in South Carolina. Y'all get a 38% premium in what you get out of your state government versus what we get? No, they don't say that. If anything, they say oftentimes, no, it seems like you get less, but you're paying a 38% premium. Why? Not because we have evil House or Senate members, but because we have a system that does not have the kind of accountability that you'd expect within your respective businesses in it. So a step forward would be moving the administrative functions out of a budget control board into a department administration for the next governor, whether it's a Republican, a Democrat, a male, a female, you name it, whatever the stripe, so that person is given the tools by which to succeed or fail at that task and then held accountable in that process. So that's one that we're asking for. A second one that we're asking for is, could we have the governor and the lieutenant governor actually run together on a ticket? I mean, think about it. I mean, in fairness to my predecessor was Governor Jim Hodges. A majority of the people of South Carolina elected him to be governor. And he said, look, if you elect me, here's the stuff that I'm going to work on. But his first check on being able to deliver on the promises that he made to the people of South Carolina was not the legislative or not the judicial branch of government. It was, in his case, just across the hall, right across the hall to your lieutenant governor's office, who in that case was of the opposite political party, opposite political persuasion, and that's not a knock against Bob Peeler, but it is a knock against the system. Can you imagine at the federal level when you said, tell you what, we're going to have a system where we're going to elect the president, and he's going to want to go in this direction, and we're going to elect a vice president, and he's going to want to go in this opposite direction. People would say that's madness. You will never get anything done with that system. But that is exactly how it works in South Carolina. And so we're saying, well, could we pull that one off? I think we could. I mean, every one of the Republican candidates this year for governor has said one of the things on their platform is to have the governor and lieutenant governor run together on a ticket. And our point is, why wait? We could pull that off in this legislative session. Why wait? And I suspect it may be the same on the Democratic side as well. I just don't know. Third thing that we're asking for on restructuring is, if I went around the room, I'd put money on it that not everybody in this room could name every constitutional officer that you all elect. Anybody want to take the opposite side of that bet? I think we know the answer. Not everyone would know. Now, why is it that it is that way? The one of the curses of our state, because we have great people, great resources, great opportunity, one of the curses of our state is the constitutional construct from which we operate. It was the Constitution of 1895. The Constitution of 1895 was a racist constitution built on the fear that a black man would be elected governor of South Carolina in Reconstruction, South Carolina. And so the traditional functions of executive branch were diffused into the wind such that even if a black man was elected governor, it wouldn't matter because he wouldn't have any responsibility anyway. Now, that is an insane model from which to run your government in the 21st century as you compete with literally 6.5 billion people across planet Earth. But that's our system. And so what we've been saying for 6.5 years is what if we change that? What if we just let the people of South Carolina decide, you want to keep electing every one of them? Fine by us. But if you want to have more of them appointed, then you could vote that way. Just let the people of South Carolina decide. I mean, do you know how many other states in the country elect their adjutant general? 0 would be right. And again, that's not a knock against Stan Spears, but it is a knock against how unusual our structure is when measured against other states, and it is a reminder of the fact that there are costs with our unusual structure.